Extra, extra, read all about it. Legendary gunslinger Wild Bill Hickok shot dead in Deadwood.
Shot through the head by John McCall while unconscious of danger. The murderer, Jack McCall, was captured after a lively chase by many of our citizens and taken to a building at the lower end of the city and a guard placed over him. As soon as this was accomplished, a coroner's jury was summoned to hear the evidence, which was to take effect that Wild Bill and others were seated at a table playing cards. Jack McCall walked in and around directly back of his victim, and when within 3 feet of him, raised his revolver and exclaiming, "Damn you, take that!" fired. The ball entering at the back of the head and coming out at the center of the right cheek, causing instant death. At the trial, the defense was that the deceased, at some place in Kansas, had killed the prisoner's brother, for which he killed the deceased. The jury had been out an hour and 30 minutes, returned the following verdict: not guilty. And so it was that on August 2nd, 1876, Deadwood's most famous resident, Wild Bill, was murdered in cold blood while playing poker at the number 10 saloon. A one-time Army scout, detective, and town marshal, Hickok was known in particular for being cool-headed, fast on the draw, and able to shoot accurately with both hands. Lionized in the national media as a Wild West icon, there's no doubt that Bill cut an impressive figure, not just among the outlaws he had to face down. George Custer's wife, Libby, described Wild Bill Hickok like this: "Physically, he was a delight to look upon. Tall, lithe, and free in every motion, he rode and walked as if every muscle was perfection, and the careless swing of his body as he moved seemed perfectly in keeping with the man, the country, and the time in which he lived. I do not recall anything finer in the way of physical perfection than Wild Bill when he swung himself lightly from his saddle." However, despite Bill's reputation as a fearsome gunslinger, by the time he had arrived in Deadwood, age was beginning to catch up with him. Although only 39, his eyesight had begun to fail, forcing him to make a living from gambling. Although Jack McCall claimed Bill had killed his brother, the more likely story is that Bill had cleaned him out the day before, then embarrassed him by offering to pay for his breakfast. After fleeing Deadwood, McCall was recaptured and tried a second time on U.S. soil, where this time he was found guilty and hanged. In a wry commentary on the fairness of the first trial, the Black Hills Weekly Pioneer, which ran the original story about Wild Bill's murder, went on to state, "Should it ever be our misfortune to kill a man, we would simply ask that our trial may take place in one of the mining camps in these hills." In just a couple of minutes, we'll have some really nice views as we drive beside Pactola Lake. The lake is large and was created by the construction of a dam back in 1952. Urban legend claims that there's a town that was submerged by the backfilling when the dam was complete. But it's not true, and any buildings that would go underwater were cleared out before anything was drowned. Another Deadwood figure who captured the public imagination from this era was Calamity Jane. Born Martha Cannery sometime in the 1850s, within 2 years both parents had died, leaving Jane to care for her 5 younger siblings. Jane moved the family again in 1868 to Wyoming, working whatever job she could do to support her brothers and sisters. Dance hall girl, laundress, dishwasher, ox team driver, and prostitute were just some of the ways in which she earned money. During this time, she also took to wearing men's clothes in order to disguise her gender, which in the male-dominated West offered her both protection and more freedom to do what she wanted. While no one knows for sure where the name Calamity Jane came from, as a hard-drinking teller of tales, Jane's reputation had already preceded her by the time she arrived in Deadwood alongside Wild Bill and Colorado Charlie Utter in 1876. Writers and journalists seized on her image as the ultimate frontier woman who had a crack shot, expert scout, and as foul-mouthed as any outlaw. And Jane's larger-than-life personality provided a never-ending source of stories to feed the legend. For this reason, it's hard to sift the fact from fiction in her life. But one thing is for sure, Despite her rough personality, she was known to have had a big, generous heart. Let's have a little talk about the Crazy Horse Memorial, and I'll have instructions as we get closer. It's recommended to allow 2 to 3 hours to visit to have a good experience. You can do it in less time by not taking the bus ride to the base of the mountain. That is, to stick to viewing Crazy Horse from the visitor center. But if we do have the time available, then it's easy to fill an entertaining 3 hours or more, exploring the site and taking in some of the entertainment. There's also a nightly laser show, so it's not a daytime-only location. The idea of the sculptor, who also worked on Mount Rushmore, was to create a sculpture so large that all 4 of Mount Rushmore's heads would fit inside. The monument would be the largest sculpture in the world when completed. But that's the catch. Work has been ongoing for over 70 years, and so far, only the head is finished. But still, the sight of the colossal head emerging from Thunderhead Mountain is spectacular. I'll talk a little more about it as we approach the entrance if we decide to go. Just briefly, during the time when tensions and conflicts between gold seekers, pioneer settlers, the U.S. government, and Native Americans were rising, Crazy Horse was an important leader in the resistance movement. He most famously fought in the Battle of Rosebud and the Battle of Little Bighorn, otherwise known as Custer's Last Stand. I hope we do have time to visit the Crazy Horse Memorial. I'm not kidding, it is an amazing sight. Right from its initial conception, there was a determination that the memorial would also be a place of education and humanitarianism. The bonus is that we have an opportunity to learn more about Sioux and Native American culture. Hold on to your hats, folks, because we're just about to start one wild ride. The Needles Highway consists of 14 miles of twisting, narrow roads, bringing us up close and personal with a wonderland of spindly rock spires and mica-studded granite domes. Along the way, we'll pass through 3 one-lane tunnels bored straight through the mountainside, the smallest of which is only 8 feet wide and 9 feet and 9 inches tall. Needless to say, if we're in an RV, make sure it'll fit through these tunnels and be able to navigate the sharp hairpin turns before we drive any farther. Also be aware that this road closes from mid-October through early April. As we drive along, you'll see plenty of places to pull over, admire the scenery, snap a few pictures, and even enjoy a picnic or snack. Anytime that you see a view you like, by all means, let's pull over and get that picture, even if it's not something that I've mentioned. If we packed a picnic or a snack, there's lots of scenic places to enjoy. The vision for this route came from South Dakota Governor and Senator Peter Norbeck, who proposed the highway in 1919 and insisted on providing access to the most scenic sections of the Black Hills. To lay out the route, Norbeck traveled through the Black Hills on horseback and on foot, surveying the land as he went. Although many told him it could not be done, Norbeck would not back down from his vision. With the help of his chief engineer, Scoville Johnson, and 150,000 pounds of dynamite, the road was finally built and opened to the public in 1922.
Yeah, it's usually closed this time.
It's left after the softer surrounding rock eroded away. Think of them as casts of the original tubes and vents that the liquid magma flowed to the surface through. Some of the rock here is estimated to be about 2 billion years old. That's some of the oldest exposed rock in North America. If we're lucky, you might look up to see a rock climber ascending this magnificent formation. When we approach the Needles Hwy, we'll see a small parking area located right before the improbably narrow Needles Tunnel. This is a fantastic place to get out and explore. Custer State Park was first established in 1913 as a wildlife preserve, there were no bison here. Yet, not 50 years before, there were an estimated 50 million bison roaming the plains. By the end of the century, those millions had dropped to a mere 300 individuals total, and bison were on the verge of extinction. Where did they all go? Well, the reasons for their disappearance are numerous. Politics, fashion, transportation, and ranching all played a part in the widespread slaughter, not just of bison, but also grizzly bears, wolves, and even the passenger pigeon. At the same time, concern over the rapid disappearance of these iconic species and the landscapes in which they lived played a key role in the creation of the world's first national parks. But first things first, what happened to the bison? Well, one of the principal reasons that the bison were almost driven to extinction had to do with control of the land. The U.S. government was eager to continue its accumulation of territory in the American West, and so sanctioned the wholesale slaughter of bison in order to deprive Native Americans of a keystone species. Bison were more than just food for the Plains Indians. They were a way of life. They provided hides for shelter and clothing, bones for tools and toys, sinew for thread and bowstrings, horns for utensils, skulls for sacred iconography, and much more. The strategy was having no bison would make it easier to force Native Americans to live a farming lifestyle on reservations.
Wow.
Much of the slaughter of bison was undertaken by commercial hunters. Coats and hats made of bison fur were all the rage in the 1800s, and a hunter could fetch as much as $3 per hide, which was better pay than factory work at the time. Bison hides were used for various purposes, such as machine belts, while the tongues were salted and sold as a gourmet item. However, because the rest of the animal had no market value, millions of bison carcasses were simply left to rot on the plains after they were skinned. The meat wasn't even used. However, not all was totally wasted, as bone collectors would eventually enter the market as well, selling the bleached bones for fertilizer and other items. Another key factor in the area. All of today's herd are descended from the original 36 animals that were purchased in 1914 from Scotty Phillip, a Scottish-born Dakota rancher who wound up playing a crucial role in saving the bison from extinction. Each September, the annual Buffalo Roundup takes place along the southern reaches of the Wildlife Loop Road, where the buffalo corrals can be found. During this time, all of the park's bison are herded back to the corral, where they're counted, branded, and treated. Each year, the herd size is managed according to the resources that are available within the park. One note of caution, I do recommend staying in your vehicle if you take the Wildlife Loop Road, as bison are massive animals, usually weighing between 1,000 and 2,000 pounds, and they can sprint as fast as 35 to 45 miles an hour. For comparison, the bison would catch Usain Bolt, whose top speed maxes out at 28 miles per hour. So unless you're faster than Usain, you get my drift, right? Although bison are generally not aggressive, they will attack people who get too close. So a little friendly advice, no selfies outside the car, please.
Do they get it right away, though?
They get the right away.
Do they get the right away?
Make things interesting for self-driving visitors like us. This is the first corkscrew turn on the highway. I think their mission wasn't simply to create the easiest route. It was also to build something unique and fun. The next ones are known as the pigtail bridges. Next up is the Doane Robinson Tunnel, dedicated to the man who provided the original inspiration for Mount Rushmore. Like the Scoville-Johnson Tunnel, this tunnel is oriented precisely towards Mount Rushmore in order to provide a postcard-like frame before you drive through. There's a small pullout on the right-hand side just before the tunnel entrance if you'd like to grab a picture. Soon after the tunnel is the first of the wooden pigtail bridges, which spiral downwards and are named for their corkscrew shape. The pigtail bridges were added to negotiate steep changes in the terrain. Geometrically speaking, they're actually helix-shaped, which means they form a curve in three-dimensional space, and the angle of the curve remains constant relative to the central axis throughout. I know what you're thinking. Just like a pig's tail, right?
Is that? Huh?
All right, the two pigtail bridges are just ahead, and I'll leave you to drive through them. Were the road architects just playing with us when they designed the first one to be left-handed, going counterclockwise, then the second one right-handed, going clockwise? We're nearing the end of the Iron Mountain Highway. Not your average drive, was it?
No.
If it's now time for us to visit Mount Rushmore,
Yep.
be sure to turn left at the upcoming fork in the road to follow Route 244. That's the final short stretch to the site. If we're not visiting Mount Rushmore right now,